Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatley Tones Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video. Hope you're all doing well. Yesterday was the 13th of July 2025, 40 years or the 40th anniversary of Live Aid, and I was lucky enough to be at Wembley Stadium that day for this amazing concert. So I thought I'd do a quick video just talking about it. Now, when you think about Live Aid, I think you have to put it back into the context of the times in which it happened to fully appreciate how monumental and how groundbreaking it was at the time. Now, I can quite clearly remember, sometime at the back end of 1984, maybe late October, early November, seeing Michael Burke's report on the BBC News on the famine of in Ethiopia. Just absolutely heartbreaking footage. Thousands and thousands of people starving, a famine of biblical proportions in the 80s, which is just incredible that something like that could happen in modern times, I suppose. And the report that I saw on the BBC News would have been the same report that Bob Geldof would have seen in his house in Kent, just a few miles away. And Bob Geldof was obviously moved enough by these terrible scenes to do something about it. And there's clips, there were interviews with aid workers who were asked to make a choice of who they would feed and who they wouldn't feed, who had a chance of surviving, basically playing God, deciding who lives and who dies. What a horrible situation that is. But as I say, Bob Geldof had the gumption to do something about it. And although the Boomtown Rats, their star was fading by 1985. I mean, in 1979, when I Don't Like Mondays was #1 in the charts, they're one of the biggest bands in Britain at that time. I'd seen them a few times live on their way up. I think the last time I saw them was at Christmas 1978, I think. But their star was fading, but he still knew enough people in the music business to pull something quite incredible together. He started making phone calls, and he wrote this song, Do They Know It's Christmas, with Midure from Ultravox, and he started calling people contemporary pop stars. Who were the biggest stars in the UK at that time? Well, it was bands like Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, Wham, Culture Club. Paul Young was big back then. U2 were on their way up. There was also some old school pop stars that were involved as well. Phil Collins played drums on the record. Rick Parfitt and Francis Rossi from Status Quo were involved. Paul Weller from the Style Council, Sting was there as well. And in one day they taught everyone the song, recorded it, mixed it. Within a week, it was in the shops, and it was #1 for Christmas 1984, and it sold about 2 million copies, outselling Mull of Kintyre, which was at that time the top-selling single in the UK. Now, it was quite some time, well, not quite some time, but it was a month or so before America got themselves into gear. Bob Geldof had been going on. He'd been speaking to Michael Jackson, and they pulled together something similar. We Are the World. This song had less contemporary stars on it, but so many huge American stars. Michael Jackson, obviously, Lionel Richie, Paul Simon, Kenny Rogers, Tina Turner, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Diana Ross. One contemporary one that I remember, Cyndi Lauper, was involved as well. And what I find funny is when you look at the videos for the two songs, the UK song and the American song, they're both done in the same sort of way, with all the stars in the studio, recording the thing. And it's interesting to compare, because the UK one was done on a Sunday morning. It was done on a Sunday morning in London. Obviously, all these pop stars turn up, and they probably had a big night out on the Saturday night, the night before, and they all turn up, they're really dressed down, casual clothes, looking a bit scruffy. Sting turns up with a newspaper, a Sunday paper that he's probably bought on his way to the studio. But then when you go to the American version, it as far as the dress goes, it's more or less the same. Apart from Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson in the We Are the World video is in, an embroidered jacket, his stage jacket. He's got like the silver glittery glove and the silver glittery socks as well, which I think, was a bit weird. It was just a bit weird. Maybe the calls kind of passed Michael Jackson by a little bit, but they did make the record. It did sell lots of copies and made lots of money for the Band Aid Trust. I just think it's interesting making that comparison, that he turned up sort of dressed as if he was about to go on stage, and everyone else is in their sort of Sunday casual clothes. When the initial announcement of who was going to be appearing in Live Aid was announced, it didn't really have that many of the big hitters. More the contemporary bands were first really to sign up. Getting the big hitters was obviously a much more difficult task for Bob Geldof. If you've ever read his autobiography, Is That It? It's a very, very funny book, and he goes into great detail about how he got various people involved. Like he would go to David Bowie and say, well, I've got Elton John and I've got Queen, and he didn't have them, but he just was saying that just to get Bowie signed up. And then he could go to Elton John and say, well, David Bowie signed up, so you've got to do it, sort of thing. So that that's how that sort of happened. But when that initial list was announced, I sort of shrugged my shoulders a little bit and thought, well, that sounds like a nice day in front of the telly. But then when they started adding some of the others, particularly once they added Paul McCartney, then I knew that I had to go, because it would have been Paul's first live appearance since the 1979 Wings tour, and the first time that he'd been out playing live since John had been murdered. He spent a lot of the early 80s being just too scared to go out too much in public in case he was next. But once he was on board, then so was I. And getting tickets for it were easier than you would imagine. Well, they were pretty easy for me, because my ex-wife, she went and queued up outside Wembley Stadium with a mate of hers, and they got 4 tickets, and ended up going with my mate Ray and his ex-wife and as well. So the tickets were not so hard to get. They were £25 each. This is the programme for Live Aid, which cost, you can see there, £5, which was quite a lot for a programme. But look how many pages are in it. Programmes for rock shows were not like this back in 1985. And if I just sort of open it up here, you can see the tickets there, which were £25, listed as being £5, but with a £20 donation. And I'll just quickly show you probably the page that you're most interested in. That is the Paul McCartney page of the programme, where it's got a kind of a timeline of his career up to that point. But on the day, 13th of July 1985, it's a beautiful day. We drove up to Wembley in time for the doors to open, and once we were let in, there was this, this huge stampede towards the front, as you can imagine. I mean, I didn't get anywhere near the front, but I would say if you imagine Wembley as being a football pitch, I was probably halfway between the centre circle and the penalty area. That's roughly where we were. We were well in front of the mixing desks and stuff like that. So we had a pretty good view, and we took up our place and waited for proceedings to begin. And they started with Charles and Di being led into the royal box, which was just sort of behind us. I suppose that's sort of in the middle of the pitch, and Bob Geldof was with them, and sat behind were members of Queen, and I think Mark Knopfler was there as well, and a few other rock personalities sitting behind them. I think they kind of stayed maybe for 2 or 3 acts. I think they probably went after the Boomtown Rats. I can't really remember. I didn't, it was all eyes on the stage. We weren't really looking at them. I'm sure Prince Charles, or King Charles as he is now, was probably horrified by the whole thing. He's not really a fan of pop music, but Princess Diana was a big fan. She probably would have been happy to stay for the whole day, but they went fairly early. None of the bands that appeared were to get any more than 20 minutes to perform. Some considerably less than that. Some people that just did cameo appearances with other artists like Alison Moyer, who came on with Paul Young and did a Marvin Gaye cover. But there was quite a lot of before the full lineup was announced, there was a lot of jostling for positions with artist agents saying, my artist's got to go here, my artist's got to go there, and that sort of thing. But nobody wanted to go first. And Status Quo, you read about this in Bob's book. Status Quo said, "We'll go first, no problem. We'll go first. We'll do our thing, get off, and then watch the rest of the show." And Francis Rossi said later, everyone thought they were mad, but it turned out to be the absolute opposite. They opened the whole show with the only song that they could possibly open the show with, Rocking All Over the World. And the minute those opening piano chords rang out from the stage, you've got like 72,000 people bouncing up and down in unison. And when you see it back on the TV, that the sight of that is just something to behold. To be honest, I think they did three songs. Next on was the Style Council. As I've said before, I'm a big fan of Paul Weller and the Jam, but I'd never seen the Style Council before. They came on. They did four songs, including Walls Come Tumbling Down, which was very appropriate for the day, Internationalist, The Big Boss Groove, and You're the Best Thing. So they, most of the bands that were on were asked to stick with their hits because Bob Geldof's theory was if they've sold hundreds of thousands of records, then there'll be hundreds of thousands of people donating while they are on. That was his theory. Most of the bands stuck to that regime. One or two didn't. After Style Council, I think it was the Boomtown Rats, and as I said, the Boomtown Rats, their star had faded, and Bob Geldof's idea for who was going to be in and who was going to be out were, if they've sold lots of records, then we want them on because they're going to help to raise loads of money. Well, the Boomtown Rats had stopped really selling records by 1985, but they had sold a lot of records earlier in their career. But obviously, it's Bob's show. So the Boomtown Rats are going to play, and they were fantastic. They opened up with I Don't Like Monday, and then we had our first moment of Live Aid when it gets to that bit in the song where the lyric says, "And the lesson today is how to die." Bob Geldof stands there motionless with his fist clenched like that and just holds it in silence, doesn't go on to the next part of the song for what seemed like an eternity, but it was probably only about 20 seconds. But it was, it was pop drama at its finest, and everyone kind of, realised that, this is the real reason why we're here. So next up was Adam Ant, and I had absolutely no interest in watching Adam Ant whatsoever. He'd been a big star in the UK with his band Adam and the Ants in the early 80s, had #1 singles with Stand and Deliver and Prince Charming, but now he was solo, and he chose, he did one song, luckily he only did one song, and he chose an unreleased track to do as his one song. It's going to be his next single. It's called Viva La Rock. No one had heard it, so no one was really that interested. We took the opportunity to rest our legs and sit down for a bit, and while he was on the stage doing the splits and cavorting on the stage to this song no one had heard of, we just sat there and laughed, which just goes to show that ridicule is something to be scared of. I think next up was Ultravox. Midge came out in a long, full-length leather coat. It was like 90 degrees at Wembley that day. And he's in a full leather coat. They were quite good. They did some of the hits, including Vienna, but that means nothing to me. Artists came and went. I think Elvis Costello was next. He just did one song. He did a cover of All You Need Is Love. He introduced it as a great old northern folk song. He just did it, just him and a guitar. There was Nick Kershaw came out. I quite like Nick Kershaw, actually. I think he's a very underrated guitarist. He did a couple of his hits, Wouldn't It Be Nice, and The Riddle. The Riddle, still a song that everyone is still trying to find the answer to. Sade came out, did a few songs. I enjoyed her set. Next up was Sting and Phil Collins, and it was quite. We knew that they were going to be playing together. We didn't quite know how that was going to work, and but Sting was on guitar. Phil Collins on piano. First of all, Sting did a couple of songs. I think he did Roxanne and Driven to Tears. Then Phil Collins did, I think, 3 songs. He did Against All Odds, In the Air Tonight, and a song called Long Long Way to Go, which was from his latest album, No Jacket Required, which I think Sting is actually on the record as well of that. And then Sting did... He did, what did he do? He did Message in a Bottle and Every Breath You Take with Phil Collins on backing vocals. But the interesting thing about Sting and Phil Collins' set is that they were supposed to have Julian Lennon with them. That was on the bill, and it's even in the programme. I'll just show you there. If you can see that. Sting, Phil Collins and Julian Lennon. Now, I don't know why Julian Lennon wasn't there, but he wasn't. He didn't turn up. I'm not sure the reason why. But, Julian Lennon was quite a big star at that time in 1984. Velotte, his debut album, Velotte, had sold a lot of copies, and he had a big hit single with Too Late for Goodbyes. I think he got to #2. So... there's reason for him to be on the bill, but he didn't show up in the end. And I say, artists came and artists went. I wasn't that interested in Howard Jones, Brian Ferry, Paul Young. U2 came on, which I weren't really into them either at that particular time. Well, I'm not now either. But I think their set is mostly remembered for Bono pulling a teenage girl out of the audience who was being crushed right at the front, and he hopped off the stage and dropped down to the sort of the sub stage and pulled her up onto that, and he's dancing with her. I think everyone remembers that. Dire Straits came on. They were really good. They did Money for Nothing with Sting doing his part on that song as well, the harmonies and stuff like that. But now we were getting to the best part of the show, the part of the show that I was most looking forward to, which was Queen, David Bowie, Elton John and Paul McCartney. Also, I should say that when Phil Collins finished his set with Sting, got on a helicopter to Heathrow Airport, jumped on Concorde, which took him to Philadelphia so he could perform in the US Live Aid show, where he did Against All Odds and In the Air Tonight. He also drummed with Led Zeppelin for their reunion, which was an absolute disaster, which Jimmy Page blamed Phil Collins completely, which was totally unfair because there was another drummer on stage with Phil Collins as well, and Phil Collins didn't have the chance to rehearse with them or anything like that. And out-of-tune vocals, out-of-tune guitars was probably more the reason why Led Zeppelin's performance was really subpar. He also played drums with Eric Clapton during Eric Clapton's set in Philadelphia as well. So it was a busy old day for Phil Collins. When he first comes out to do his set, I think he says something like, "I was in England this afternoon. Funny old world, isn't it?" And it indeed is. And anyway, on with the show. Next up were Queen. Again, Queen, massive in the 70s. I was a big fan in the 70s, but I kind of dropped out after the Jazz album 1979. And their start was also fading. In fact, Bob Geldof didn't even want them. It was only the promoter Harvey Goldsmith who said, "You've got to have Queen. You've got to have Queen in it." And he said they'll be brilliant. And indeed they were. Indeed they were. We all know about Queen's legendary set at Live Aid, and that sight of when they did Radio Gaga, and there's like 72,000 people's hands clapping in time with the song is a real sight to behold. But I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen one man control absolutely kill it in the way that Freddie Mercury did that day. He just absolutely held court on the stage that day. He commanded the stage, he commanded the crowd, and in fact he commanded the whole world. An absolute brilliant set. Now by this time the show in Philadelphia had started, and we were now getting the pictures from Philadelphia being back on the screens. We saw bands like Bryan Adams and the Beach Boys, some of the early bands that played in the afternoon, and that was quite good because before the USA show had started, we had to wait for the sets to be changed in between each band, but now we had something to watch while they were changing the sets for each band. So next up was David Bowie, and I kind of felt sorry for Bowie having to follow Queen, but to be absolutely honest, he nailed it as well. He came on, he just looked immaculate in his grey suit with his bleach blonde hair, and this was the first time that I'd ever seen this wonderful man live, and I was really looking forward to his set. As I say, he absolutely killed it. Did TVC 15, Rebel Rebel, Modern Love, Heroes, with its line, "Just for one day, we could be heroes just for one day." Very apt for Live Aid Day. But at the end of his set, he sacrificed one of his songs to show a video, and the video that he showed was kind of the same footage that we'd seen in the Michael Burke report from the BBC back in November 1984, but over the top of it was this song, which is Drive by the Cars. A fantastic song, and the words of the song just seemed to fit the footage perfectly. It was just so powerful. The whole stadium sort of fell into silence, and there was it was hardly a dry tear in the house. There's one part that I can remember where there's a small child that had been that is just like minutes from death. It's been wrapped up in this sort of sack shawl and being laid to rest with all the other dead bodies by her father, and as he kind of walks away, the body is, you know, you can see that the sack that she's in, or he's in, is still twitching with the very last seconds of life. It's really heartbreaking. But there is an upside. There is an upside as well, because in another part of this video, it shows you know, a young girl, probably about 2 or 3 years old, being held by her father. You know, she looked as if she was minutes from death as well. Barely enough energy to open her eyes, covered in flies, and all that sort of thing. But she was one of the lucky ones that received the aid when the money came in, and she got fed and she got better. And 20 years later, when there was the Live 8 show, she was brought onto the stage by Bob Geldof and introduced to the audience. She was about 24 by then, and she's educated. I'm pretty sure that I remember that she was she'd become a nurse or something like that. That is one of the success stories, and that, my friends, is the power of rock and roll. But you know, for the second time in her short life, she kind of reduced me to tears, to be absolutely honest. But you know, big kudos to David Bowie for sacrificing a part of his own set to show this video, because when that video was shown, and the hour directly after the video was shown, was when the most donations came in from TV viewers around the world during that hour, and that was because, you know, the power of this video that just reminded everyone exactly what this day was about. Incidentally, the song that David Bowie dropped to allow this video to be shown was 5 Years. My very favourite David Bowie song. So I didn't get to see him play that live this time, but it's not all about me, is it? When I was saying about the bit of the show that I was most looking forward to, I forgot to mention The Who. They were next, and I'd never seen The Who before Live Aid, and so I was really looking forward to their set. Now, Bob Geldof had a real problem getting The Who to agree. Pete and Roger were hating each other at this particular time. They'd split up in 1982 and not really got back together at all since then. So it took a lot of persuading. You know, Bob had to, you know, explain the importance of the charity and that sort of thing to get them to agree. But agree they did, and they were fantastic. Kenny Jones was the drummer on live for Live Aid, and they kicked off their set with My Generation. And about halfway through the song, just as it gets to I Hope You All Just Fade Away, the TV pictures faded away. That I think a fuse blew or something like that. But the TV feed was cut. I mean, obviously it was fine in the stadium. It was absolutely fine. We saw the whole set, but I think TV viewers around the world didn't see the whole of their set. The TV feed came back about halfway through the next song, which was Pinball Wizard. They also did Love Reign Over Me, and they did Won't Get Fooled Again. Absolutely fantastic. They were brilliant. But we were very lucky to be in the stadium to witness the whole of their set. Next up was Elton John, and as Elton John came out, the heavens opened and it started pouring with rain, which was so welcome because it had been so hot in the stadium, you know, about 90 degrees or something like that. And when it started raining, everyone was just reveling in it. It was great. It had been a really hot day. I think at the front of the crowd there were stewards that were hosing water across the front few rows of the crowd, but we were, you know, far too far back to get any of that water. But as I say, the rain was very welcome. Elton did a great set. He did I'm Still Standing and Benny and the Jets. Rocket Man, Kiki D came out, did Don't Go Breaking My Heart. George Michael came out and did Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. And you know, I'm going to stick my neck out here, and I think that this was him doing that song, compared with the sort of the nonsense that he was doing with Wham, was probably the first time that George Michael was maybe taken seriously as a vocalist. Did a great duet with Elton on that song, which I think was released as a single after the event. But Elton John was great. Then Brian May and Freddie Mercury came out and they did Is This the World We Created, just on acoustic guitar. And then it was time for Paul McCartney. So when Paul came out, the stage was set in complete darkness. We didn't even know that he'd arrived on stage until the opening bars of Let It Be rang out. But after only a few seconds, his mic cut out and we couldn't hear him sing. All we could hear was the piano, and the whole crowd was singing along to Paul playing the piano. His microphone suddenly came back after about 2 minutes of the song, and suddenly there's this great big swell of cheering from the crowd that we could finally hear Paul singing. And I don't think Paul knew that his microphone had cut out, because he looked quite startled when there was this sudden, big cheer halfway through the song. Didn't really realise why everyone was suddenly cheering, but I think he might have had an inkling, because he did a real extended version of Let It Be. It goes on for about 5 minutes, I think. So he kind of repeats verses towards the end of the song. He's joined on stage by David Bowie and Pete Townsend and Alison Moyet and Bob Geldof. And if you watch the video of this, obviously I couldn't see this on the day, I wasn't close enough, but you'll see Pete Townsend in a rare show of humour tickling Paul on the back while he is playing the piano. And at the end of the song, Paul and Pete Townsend get Bob Geldof on their shoulders and raise him to the crowd as the hero that he is. After Paul had finished, everyone who was still in the stadium, talking about the pop stars, all came out on stage, and they did Do They Know It's Christmas, and that was the end of the concert. Finished about 10 o'clock. We got home around midnight, and I'd installed a couple of people in my house to record the whole thing on video, because I needed people there, because at that time, videotapes, the maximum length was about 4 hours, so I needed someone to keep changing the tapes. And got home, started watching what was left of the Philadelphia Live Aid. Watched it right to the end, but it finished about 5 o'clock in the morning. And it was great. But I'm not going to talk too much about that show, because I wasn't there, and it doesn't seem much point. I'm just talking about first-hand experience in this video. But what was the aftermath of the Live Aid concert? Bob Geldof was involved with African famine relief for many years after Live Aid. There's this famous bit of footage that I can remember from a few years later, where he's having an argument with Margaret Thatcher about releasing the EU surplus food mountains to Africa, and she says, well, it's not as simple as that, Mr. Geldof. And he says, yes it is, Mrs. Thatcher. And wasn't the first time that he'd taken her on, because he also tried to get VAT not to be paid on the Christmas single, which she refused point blank. But I think that that Live Aid was the day that the 80s got a social conscience, because before that it had all been Thatcher's Britain and stocks and shares and yuppies and how much is your house worth and all that sort of thing. And that kind of changed a little bit after Live Aid. People were a little bit more conscious of people less fortunate than themselves, and it took it took someone with the chutzpah of Bob Geldof to be able to pull this off. But it's a real shame that when governments, back then were doing so little as far as foreign aid goes, that it takes, a bunch of silly old pop stars to save lives, to literally save lives. And I think, you know, just for a few hours in July 1985, pop music did what it had been threatening to do for about 3 decades and changed the world, and that is a great thing. Okay, well, if you want to share your memories of Live Aid, if you were there, please tell me about it down in the comments. If you just want to talk about Live Aid, either the US show or the UK show, please do so. I'd love to read your comments. Okay, that is it from me. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye.